The MLB offseason is officially underway. We'll talk about that and what the Tigers' winter could look like all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen. Every single day, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Hope everyone had a fantastic weekend. Unfortunate Lions loss on Sunday. I'm recording this before the Wings play the Sharks. Hopefully they don't completely fall apart like they did against the Ducks. Just not a Michigan State got crushed. Michigan looked terrible. Just not a great sports weekend for the city. Shout out the Detroit Pistons, man. Shout out the Stones. In baseball world, Pistons in Mexico, by the way. Get a big win. Very cool. In baseball, the World Series concluded this weekend as the Los Angeles Dodgers are World Series champs for the second year in a row. The first time since the Yankees three-peated back at the end of the 90s that we have had a back-to-back World Series champion. That means, obviously, that the MLB offseason has officially kicked off. Another season in the books. Today, we're going to discuss the Tigers', I guess we'll call it offseason calendar a little bit, but we'll dissect all of the important deadlines and dates and things to know throughout the offseason and what each of those could look like for your Detroit Tigers. So we're going to start off by talking about the, first thing on the docket chronologically, which is that expiring contracts and players that are set to be free agents are now free agents. They are off the roster. They are not a part of the Tigers organization, effective immediately following the World Series. So Alex Cobb, Gleyber Torres, Tommy Kahnle, Kyle Finnegan, Chris Paddack, and Rafael Montero are all free agents and not on the Tigers' 40-man roster any longer. Now, 5 days after the conclusion of the World Series, which is going to be November 6th, I think that's Thursday? My calendar's not in here anymore. I moved it to the other room in my move. Look at that. I'm pretty sure it's Thursday, though. That will be when other teams are now allowed to start signing and offering contracts and negotiating with free agents. So you have a few days, 5 days, following the World Series where the Tigers are the only team that can discuss re-signing any of these guys, and even though they're not on the roster. Of that group, who could be back? Cobb, I really think is retiring, and even if he isn't, he's certainly not going to be back in the Tigers organization. Tommy Kahnle, I can't imagine the Tigers are going to re-sign. Chris Paddack, I don't think there's any way the Tigers are re-signing. So that leaves Kyle Finnegan, Gleyber Torres, and Rafael Montero. I have Finnegan, Gleyber, Montero written on my show sheet, so I just made Gleyber Montero his name, apparently. Rafael Montero is interesting. I could see them just throwing him like a one-year deal, or if his market isn't very good, maybe even giving him like a minor league deal. Just depend, like for depth purposes. I mean, he was like serviceable for the Tigers. He gets swings and misses to an extent. I think odds are greater that he's out of the organization and that he finds a job somewhere else, but it wouldn't totally shock me if the Tigers just threw him a very expendable one-year deal that doesn't lock them up where like he has to be in the majors all of next season, but like is under contract to an extent. Glaber, we've talked about a lot. We don't have to go too much more in depth on that. I don't think he's back, but I don't think he's back. Certainly, I don't think he's back before Thursday. I guess that's like my biggest point on today's show is that even if you think he might come back, he's not going to re-sign before testing the open market. He's not going to re-sign with the Tigers hours before he becomes a free agent and other teams can bid on him and he can get a gauge for his market, etc. So he will be a free agent. I can almost promise you he will be a free agent when it opens up on Thursday. But yeah, for whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be back. It just means he's definitely going to test the market at a minimum. I don't think he's coming back no matter what. Kyle Finnegan, I also think is maybe not as much of a shoe-in, but I really think that Finnegan is going to test the free agent market as well. I would have zero issue, I mean, fairly obviously, zero issue with him coming back to the Tigers in 2026 if they work something out. He's another one I feel like is going to want to test his market value in the open market and at least not re-sign before Thursday. So we'll have to see. The downside, in air quotes, I say, of trading for a player at the deadline that is a rental and then does really well is that everybody in the organization and in the fan base has interest in bringing him back because he did really well. But then, you're not only competing with you and the player and working out a contract and whatnot and determining value, you are also 29 other teams also have the stats and the numbers and watched him produce the way he did down the stretch there. So we'll see what kind of market he has. I really think there's a chance he gets a decent contract. I don't think it's the end of the world, to me at least, if they don't bring him back. Like, I don't think the team or the bullpen is completely screwed if he's not a Tiger in 2026, but I certainly would welcome a reunion in the same breath. November 6th is obviously, again, I think I'm recording this on the 2nd, so math would tell me that that's the 6th, I believe. That Thursday is. A lot of deadlines on Thursday, aside from just, again, the obvious, free agents are allowed to then start negotiating with other teams. The qualifying offer deadline is also on Thursday. So we will talk about the qualifying offer, who on the Tigers could get it, what it means for the rest of baseball as well, right after this. First, though, going to talk to you all about our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to bet on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps everything exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel gives new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2, Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow, and we are still at 5 days a week, despite the fact that no baseball is being played. We go to 3 days a week at some point in late December, after winter meetings, obviously, around the holiday season, and then we return to 5 days a week when pitchers and catchers report in February. But we're still, even in the, that January kind of dry spell, we're still here 3 days a week as well. Today we discuss what the offseason kind of roadmap, calendar, whatever word you want to use is fine by me. Thursday is a big day with a lot of deadlines. Free agency opens and the qualifying offer deadline, among other things, even still, we'll talk about later. The qualifying offer is the mean of the top 125 contracts in Major League Baseball every year. I remember the days when the qualifying offer was first introduced, at least the current iteration of it. And, a QO was a nice 14 mil, 16 mil. The qualifying offer is now a hair over, I believe, this season, $22 million. Now, it's only a one-year contract. Always, you can't offer a qualifying offer to someone who has been offered one before. You also can't offer one to a player that has played for multiple teams over the course of a season. So we'll talk about this a little bit more leading up to the actual day. And obviously, if and when the Tigers do offer some QOs to some players in the organization, then we'll address that later in the week. I think I don't know, it's kind of a weird situation. So Evan Petzold of The Free, first off, just put out a great piece highlighting all the important dates of the offseason. And I used his and Evan Woodbury's of M Live, who also always does an offseason calendar and does a really good job every year with it. I used both of them because I don't, no one sends me the dates. I have to go find them myself. So, but Evan Petzold put in his piece that he put down the possibility of Gleyber Torres and or Jack Flaherty getting a qualifying offer, offered to them from the Detroit Tigers. Gleyber kind of makes sense to me. Like he made it pretty clear last offseason that he was going to take a one-year deal to bet on himself and then get a longer-term contract this offseason. If that is the case and you and him are confident that that's going to happen, then offer him the qualifying offer. Because if a player rejects a qualifying offer, then you get a draft pick in the following year's MLB draft. You get in the compensation round, which is in the first, usually between the first and second round, depending on the, competitive balance compensation. There's a ton of extra rounds thrown in there in baseball. And I'm pretty sure all time, like barely over 10, I don't even think it's 15, but it's around that, players have ever accepted a qualifying offer in, again, its current form and iteration. So it's something that teams usually do when they know it's going to get declined and don't usually offer it with the intention of the player actually taking it. Flaherty will obviously depend a little bit on if he accepts his option or not, as we'll talk about that in a second here as well. If he accepts it, then he's just on the roster immediately. His salary is $20 million because that's what his option is. And if he declines, then he's a free agent and the Tigers could offer him a qualifying offer. But there's some interesting politics with that one. His option is 20 mil and the QO would be around 22. If he declines it, would the Tigers offer him a qualifying offer knowing that they would be giving him a raise of what he just declined? That optically just seems a little weird to me. Because if that is the case, then if they are confident that the Tigers are going to give him a QO, he should just decline the option no matter what. Because, okay, I'll just take the qualifying offer. That's a one-year deal, which is also what the option is, for just $2 million more. But then if the Tigers know that, right, then you start getting into if they know that he knows that they know, right? If the Tigers know his intentions there and kind of can see the writing on the wall with that, then maybe they don't offer him a QO because it's okay, well, you just declined that. We're not going to give you a raise to decline your option. Again, it's really weird that I don't know, maybe the organization tells him you accept this or we can renegotiate for fewer than 22 mil, but more than 20. That seems like a really niche, weird thing that wouldn't happen either. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud, but I'm an overthinker. It could just be that, but ultimately I think Flaherty wants a multi-year deal. And it could just be that simple. Everything that I just said could be completely just ridiculous overthinking and being stupid. And it could just be he wants a multi-year deal. He's going to decline the option. The Tigers are going to give him a qualifying offer. And then someone else is going to give him a 3 to 4 year deal. And he's going to accept that because he wants the longer term security even if it is for around similar or even less slightly AAV. November 6th is also the deadline for player options, which takes us into good transition there. Jack Flaherty, $20 million player option, so completely his call. Paul Sewald has a $10 million mutual option. Randy Dobnik has a $6 million club option. Jose Urquidy, a $4 million club option. Flaherty, like I said, his choice. Paul Sewald, mutual option. I'd imagine he will opt in. I can't imagine the Tigers also opt into that. He barely pitched. He didn't look very good when he did. He's pushing 40, and you traded him for scraps. I don't think the Tigers want to be on the hook for $10 million with Paul Sewald. Randy Dobnik, similar conversation. Great story. Cool that he was a part of the organization, right? Played for the Utica Unicorns all those years ago. Like, really cool story. I can't imagine, like, he didn't even come close to pitching in the major leagues this year. He was a AAA, like, depth pitching option for them. I don't think they're going to sign him to a $6 million deal next year to do that same thing. The interesting one is, aside from Flaherty, is Jose Urquidy. That's somewhat of a decision because $4 million, that's pretty cheap, all things considered. And he has experience with some people on the coaching staff, obviously AJ Hinch being the biggest one. I don't know. I could really go either way with that one. If they want to do it just because it's cheap and, like, ultimately, if he's not good in spring training, that's like an expendable thing you can buy out, then okay. But I don't need them to accept that either, obviously. So we'll keep tabs on that. Thursday is also when the injured list goes away. So all the players that are on the 60-day injured list, because if you're on the 60-day, you're not on the 40-man roster. If you're on the 15-day, then you are still on the 40-man roster. So the injured list goes away starting Thursday and doesn't come back until spring training. So you have to add back the 6 major league players that are on at least the MLB 60-day injured list. That's Reese Olson, Jackson Joe, Bo Brisky, Jason Foley, Sean Gunther, and Ty Madden. Technically, Alex Cobb is on there too, but we already talked about him. He also has his contract ending, so we won't talk about him here. Now, that's 6 players that I just listed, and they can cut anyone they want, but they also have exactly 6 players that are entering free agency that we talked about earlier, right? So that are on expiring contracts. So technically, they can do absolutely nothing and still just be at 40, which works out really conveniently and well. So tip of the cap to, I don't know, fate for having the injured list be the same as I don't know where I was going with that, but it is convenient, easier that than the alternative. But obviously, again, if they do want to cut people, they can do that whenever they want. It wouldn't surprise me if there was still some people on the hook come Thursday. November 10th is when the GM meetings. Oh, and then as far as the injured players go, I expect all of those guys to be reinstated to the 40 and not get cut. Reese Olson, Jackson Joe blocks. Jason Foley a lock. I think Bo Brisky is back. Ty Madden, maybe some nuance there, but I would be shocked if on the first deadline, the first day of the offseason, essentially, that they kick him to the curb. I would find that hard to believe. And then Sean Gunther, I guess maybe is the guy that is the biggest question mark. But even then, there's so many other guys in this bullpen that I would prefer them to get rid of than Gunther. So we'll keep an eye on that. And they'll have to get rid of people on the 40-man when they sign players or if they make a trade or, you know what I mean? Like there's just because they make it to Thursday doesn't mean they're here for the rest of the winter. There's plenty more stops and whatnot along the way. GM meetings start November 10th. This is not winter meetings. This is just where like Scott Harris and Jeff Greenberg will go. And there's not usually like moves attached to this, like winter meetings, at times does. But Evan Petzold of the Freep noted that Scott Harris will speak to the media on November 12th during the week of GM meetings and already kind of alluded to, Scott Harris already alluded to some of the questions he knows that he'll be asked and whatnot at the end of season media availability. Awards are also announced that week. Not expecting any aside from Tarek Skubal, I think should be the back-to-back Cy Young winner. November 18th is the Rule 5 protection deadline. This is one of the most underrated and kind of overlooked important days of the entire offseason. Players not protected by November 18th are eligible to be drafted in the Rule 5 draft that takes place during winter meetings in December. There is a laundry list of eligible players here, a ton. So we're not going to go through. We will at some point, just not today. When that day gets closer, we'll go through all the different possibilities. But this is where a big influx of players are added to the 40-man roster, because you have to add them to the 40. And if they're not, then they're Rule 5 eligible. So the only player that I think is a complete lock, like no question about it, is Hao-Yu Lee. But again, there's a lot. Jake Miller is a guy that has impressed some people over the last year and a half. Gage Workman, again, actually got taken in the Rule 5 last year, but then did poor enough where the Cubs sent him back to the Tigers organization. Obviously, Thyron Lorenzo is going to be a big talking point. I imagine that's going to be a more than likely keep as well. But we will talk about that again. We'll have a whole episode, as we always do, dedicated to the protection deadline and go over each player that is eligible and the pros and cons of, protecting them and whatnot. Qualifying offer decisions. Also, players have to accept or reject qualifying offers by that November 18th date as well. The next big date is November 21st. That is the non-tender deadline. We'll talk about that right after this. First, though, going to talk to you all about our friends over at Game Time. We love our friends over at Game Time. The NFL is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium, surrounded by fans cheering on your team, but let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's very frustrating, and that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Game Time is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the Game Time guarantee, so you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is actually the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games, your Lions games, for as low as $100. This price you see is the price you pay. That's easily my favorite feature on the app. So download the app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate you all for tuning in. As always, the non-tender deadline is November 21st. This Tigers team is so young that almost everybody falls into this category. The omissions from that are veterans that are under contract past this year, which are I'm not even going to try to think off the top of my head like that, but I don't think there's very many, if any at all, that fall under that category. Colt Keith, I guess, is like he's under contract for multiple years, so he's not a part of this. But almost everybody is either an expiring deal or is non-tender eligible and is not free agent eligible yet. So they will have to make a decision about everybody and whether they bring them back on a one-year deal. Those who are not arbitration eligible, just in their first few years of Major League service, just get non-tendered. Most of them get the league minimum. There's a little bit of conversation in there, but we'll talk about that as we get closer to that date. And then the rest are either tendered and are, considering arbitration, considering a one-year deal to avoid arbitration, etc. Winter meetings are on December 8th. Always super fun. One of my favorite weeks of the year. Been hit or miss the last few years. We've had a couple over the last, say, 5 years. I guess, since COVID, that's a good kind of benchmark because they didn't have it that offseason, obviously. It's kind of been either really exciting or really dull and boring. So we'll have content every single day talking about all the rumors and news and notes from winter meetings, as we always do during that week, like I said, of December 8th. Then there's nothing for a little bit. Holiday season. January 8th is when arbitration numbers and offers are announced. So this is something that Petzold has brought up a lot. I know Cody Stavenhagen has brought up a lot as well of The Athletic, is that the Tigers in the past have made it a point that they are not going to negotiate in between this date where numbers are exchanged on January 8th and then when the actual arbitration hearings are, which are almost always in February, right before pitchers and catchers report. So we'll talk about all the non-tender candidates. We will talk arbitration eligible players specifically. We always have a whole episode where we just go through the MLB trade rumors, arbitration projections and who's going to come back, who's not, who might make it to arbitration, who won't, etc. But it's very interesting that they do that. The Tigers also have been pretty good about not going to arbitration with very many players and just offering a one-year deal and avoiding the process entirely, which I think everybody should prefer. That being said, like that they also, got in a fight. I don't think fight's the right word, but a disagreement with Casey Mize over a few grand a couple years back. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in that regard. And that's it. That's your off-season calendar. The World Series ended this weekend. Obviously, that's why we're having this conversation. I think that to put a bow on this season, rather, and head into the off-season, I think this was one of the best World Series of my lifetime. I think that's a fair assessment. I was a child of the 90s, the late 90s at that. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe. I'm not saying I think people are very reactionary with this is the greatest World Series of all time. I've heard that over the last 7 World Series that were played. Okay. But I do think that this one will stand the test of time, just with the stories from both teams, the big market players from both teams, the big market that both of these teams represent. And I think its impact. You had 2 extra inning games, one of which was literally in Game 7. Yamamoto was absolutely incredible in the whole series, the whole postseason. You have the back-to-back champ for a first time in 25 years. But I think the impact that this may have on the future is something worth talking about as well. And we'll have this conversation plenty, not only this offseason, but throughout next year and heading into next offseason, because that is when it will rear its ugly head. But the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners, ends after the 2026 season. And there's a bunch of talk of salary cap and whether it's needed and whether it's not, and whether a salary floor is needed or not. And all of this stuff, and the Dodgers winning, I think, only fuels that fire. Now, ultimately, they were a wild card team that went 7 games and was 2 outs away in the 9th inning or 8th, whenever Miguel Rojas hit that home run, from losing the World Series. So they were down 3-2 in the series with 2 games left. I'm not sure if that helps or hurts. I'm not sure if I've already seen on the internet a lot of people just look at the final result and they're like, the Dodgers won. They have the highest salary. We need some sort of limitation on that. But I also think you look at the Athletics of the world and the Rays and whatnot, and Cleveland, even in our own division, that kind of have a refusal to spend any money. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the impact of this, or if this World Series has an impact on that, because the players, this is a kind of a sour note to end on, I'm realizing, but I truly think the players would rather lock out and not play in 2027 than agree to a salary cap. I really do. So we'll see. We got a year of baseball guaranteed still. Okay. We got a year of Tarek Skubal guaranteed. Well, not guaranteed. I guess they could trade him if they want it. They have a year left of Tarek Skubal left. We'll see. We'll see. I mean, maybe that's more of an incentive for the Tigers to be aggressive this offseason. Hey, you're going to lose Skubal and you might lose a year of baseball. Let's maybe try in 2026 and be really aggressive about it. But I don't know. At the same time, I think we have to be proven otherwise that ownership and that the Ilitches and obviously Chris Ilitch at the center of that is going to be willing to spend decent money in free agency. So, or just the offseason in general, I should say. It'll be a fun one. Thank you for tuning in for another full season as the offseason. I mean, we've been doing offseason stuff for the Tigers for a couple weeks now, obviously, but we're officially here, deadlines and the like. We'll be back tomorrow and still at 5 days a week. I appreciate you all so much for continuing to tune in, even after baseball is not being played. We will get through, daylight savings. We'll get through the dark Midwest winters together by talking about some baseball until baseball is played again. All right. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to the everydayers. We'll be back tomorrow. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. I'll catch y'all then, baby. Go Tigers.